Hello everyone and welcome to the new episode. In this episode we are going to make a different orchestrator for our Azure AI Foundry agents. So in the previous episode we made some agents and then made a small orchestrator inside of Azure AI Foundry, because Azure AI Foundry allows one agent to orchestrate other agents. For this purpose, the orchestrator will be custom made in Python. So that is something that we're going to show how to do. Now, I also, as always, made a user interface. So it's called Insurance Employee Know Your Customer portal. And this portal actually goes through our customer workflow. So for the customer intake, identity verification, eligibility assessment, etc., etc. Now, I made this very simple, such that all of these steps, which would normally require, let's say, connecting to the tools and getting more data from the outside. Right now, the let's say the user itself, or the agent that is using this portal, or the employee of the company, he can just write down that all the documents are properly handled, and the documents do not need to be uploaded and do not need to go to the outside tools. Yeah. So let's first show how this works. So we'll say, okay, now I have a customer that needs some health insurance, and then you get some information message, and you say, okay, what is the data you need? Now we are now in the customer intake part of the flow, and the flow will go after customer intake is finished, and the flow will go to identity verification. When that is finished, it will go to eligibility assessment, etc., etc. Now, I only implemented these two agents, customer intake and identity verification, so eligibility assessment will fail, but that is good enough. That is just to show you that this is a valid approach. So now the agent says, okay, well, I need date of birth and I need consent, so give me the information. And I will say, yes, this is information. This is a random information disclaimer. And yeah, this actually made this agent says, yeah, this is good. I got all the information I need. Let's go now to the identity verification. And then the identity verification says, okay, provide confirmation that identity documents have been verified, authentic, skin checks complete, etc., etc. So again, usually for this you use some tools, but for our case, we'll just say, well, yes, I confirm that all the documents are correct. And we move further to eligibility. And as I said, this agent is not implemented, so we'll not go further. So these two agents now got orchestrated. Again, this is a simple orchestration, simple serial orchestration. And let's go and see how these agents look like. So custom intake agent is just an Azure agent, but the instructions for this agent are much more complex than the instructions for the previous agents. And why is that? Well, because in order to properly orchestrate these agents, the output of these agents need to be formatted better. So the orchestration is done based on the format of the output. So this agent actually says, okay, now the output is only JSON in a specific format. So the output says this is a stage, this is a decision, what is the reason, what are the checks, etc., etc. So the output of this agent, and actually of the customer verification agent, is very formal. Why? Because this output will then be processed by the orchestrator, and then the orchestrator will be able to guide the process. Now, in general, the orchestrator could also be an agent inside of Python, indeed, and could also be LLM that couldn't process what the custom intake agent said and go further. But I did this as a way to show that this is also a possible approach. And if I go to customer verification agent, you will see that it has a very similar output, so a very formal output JSON verification that can pass, review, and fail. Pass means verification passed, fail means verification failed, and review means I need more data. And yeah, that is these are the agents. Now let's go into the Python application to show you how that works. Okay, so this is now the Python project that implements the front end and the back end of the system, so calling the Azure Agents. I will focus on the backend, not on the front end. The backend has two main components. It's agent caller and main PI. The agent caller is a component that actually calls the agent, and main.py is the orchestrator. So I did not split it up. It should be done in the separate class, but that is something for the future if needed. Now, maybe you remember, but each agent has an ID. Yeah, and in order to make these agents more human readable in this Python application, the agent name is actually mapped to ID, and then later we use the agent names for the orchestrator and for other communication, but then in here they're mapped to IDs because the agents are called by the ID. Okay, now it's a kind of connection string. There is a project client, so to get in order to get the agent, you need to have the AI project client, and then to call the agent, you need to call this function with the step you are in, the payload, the key, and then what it does, it gets the agent ID from the name of the agent, then gets the client, gets the class that actually calls the agent. Then there's something important, that is all of these agents have something called thread ID, and thread ID is actually a session of the agent. So each agent has its own session, and when you call the same agent with the same thread ID, then you actually continue the session. So in here we check if there is existing thread ID. We use this thread ID to call the agent, otherwise we make a new thread ID. Then we set up some additional parameters, set the data, set the conversational history, and then set if the initial greeting is, then we have a little bit different prompt, otherwise each agent has its own prompt. And then we go further. So different agent step has different instructions. And then we make the message based on this content, and then we call the agent. We get the messages, and that is more or less it. And then we return these messages to the caller of this method. Now, also one important thing to understand here is that these agents will return their history. And what I mean is that, let's say you call the agent 3 times, the agent will return the response of all of, so the first time it will return, let's say 1 JSON, the second time 2 JSONs, the third time 3 JSONs. And important is that the latest message is on top. So let's say if it returns messages 0, 1, and 2, the message 0 will be the latest. So, and the message 2 will be the oldest. And that is important for this part. And we have the orchestrator. This orchestrator is on the chat endpoint. Now, we don't use thread ID, we use session ID to manage the session. So each different session handles one different conversation. Now, in here, the session is actually goes over several agents, but this orchestrator then handles that each different agent uses the same session, but each different agent also uses a different thread ID, which is then related to this session. And what do we do here? In here, we actually get, for example, the front end calls this with some kind of message. Yeah. In here, we parse this message to get information that is relevant, like date of birth, like the address, like the consent, like the documents, etc., etc. So we already parse the message to get some information that could be useful for our agents to properly actually set it up. And we get the Azure OpenAI key. Then we see what is the recent chat. We get the chat context. We say, okay, now this is existing thread ID. So for the actual agent, we make some payload data, and then we call the agent with this payload data, and then we get some result. And we get some result. We parse it. The result we know will be JSON. Of course, we hope it will be JSON. And then we parse it, and then based on what we got, like pass or review or fail, then we go. Let's say we get the pass, then we go to the next agent. And if we get review and fail, then we stay at the same agent and then ask the user to add additional details. And that's more or less it. And then if it's let's say the agent is passed to another agent, then we go and move to another agent. But then each agent, let's say move from the intake to verification agent, then you don't want to ask the agent what he wants, or that could also be the case, but you know already what the verification agent wants. So in here, you actually already tell the user, okay, now the intake agent went fine. This is what you need for the verification agent. You can already give me this information. I need it for the next agent. And that is similar for the other agents. And that is more or less it. So this is some basic setup of Orchestrator that uses Azure Agents, but that runs out of Azure. So thank you for your time, and see you next time with more complex orchestrators.